The most terrifying monsters were never created only to show us what hides in the dark. They were created to show us what hides inside ourselves. Every civilization created monsters, creatures with claws, fangs, wings, horns, scales, empty eyes, twisted bodies, and impossible hunger. They lived in forests, caves, oceans, graveyards, mountains, deserts, and underworlds. But the deeper we look into mythology, the clearer one truth becomes. Monsters were never only monsters. They were mirrors. A monster is fear given a body. It is guilt with teeth, desire with claws, greed with a starving mouth, rage covered in fur, shame hidden inside a labyrinth, temptation singing from the rocks, death walking in human shape. That is why monsters appear in every mythology. Ancient people understood that the greatest danger does not always come from outside the village. Sometimes, it comes from inside the human heart. The vampire is one of the clearest examples. Across many cultures, the dead return to feed on the living. The vampire is cold, seductive, beautiful, and hungry. It does not simply kill. It consumes. It takes life from others in order to continue existing. On the surface, the vampire is a creature of blood. But symbolically, it is a creature of desire. It represents hunger that never ends. Hunger for youth, power, control, beauty, love, or life itself. The vampire lives forever, but its immortality is a curse. It cannot create life. It can only steal it. That is why the vampire still feels modern. It is not only a monster of death. It is a monster of addiction. It shows what happens when desire is no longer controlled by morality. A vampire does not stop because it is satisfied. It stops only when there is nothing left to take. The werewolf represents another side of human nature, rage. By day, the werewolf may be a normal person, a neighbor, a friend, a father, a son, someone who speaks, works, smiles, and follows the rules. But under the full moon, the civilized mask falls away. The beast comes out. The werewolf is terrifying because it suggests that civilization is only a thin layer. Beneath language, law, clothing, and manners, something older still lives, something violent, instinctive, and impossible to reason with. It is the fear of losing yourself to anger, the fear of waking after violence and realizing the monster was not an enemy. It was you. The Wendigo, from indigenous stories of the northern forests, represents greed, hunger without limit. It is often described as a starving monstrous being connected to winter, isolation, cannibalism, and endless appetite. No matter how much it eats, it is never full. The more it consumes, the emptier it becomes. The Wendigo is not ordinary hunger. Hunger can be natural. Hunger can be necessary. The Wendigo is consumption that destroys community, morality, and the self. In a harsh world of winter and limited food, greed was not only a personal flaw. It was a threat to survival. If one person consumed too much, others could die. If one person placed their appetite above the group, the entire community could collapse. And the Wendigo has not disappeared. It still lives wherever consumption becomes endless. In the hunger for wealth that is never enough, in industries that devour nature, in systems that consume people, and in the belief that more is always better, even when the soul grows emptier. The sirens represent temptation. In Greek mythology, they sing from the rocks, calling sailors toward destruction. Their voices are beautiful. Their song promises something irresistible. But those who follow it crash into death. The sirens do not need claws or armies. They use desire. They understand that humans can be led to ruin not by force, but by longing. Every person has heard some version of the siren's song. It may be pleasure, fame, revenge, escape, forbidden love, easy success, or destructive comfort. The siren represents anything that feels beautiful while leading us toward ruin. Odysseus survives the sirens not by pretending he is too strong to be tempted, but by preparing for his weakness. He orders his men to block their ears and tie him to the mast. He survives because he respects the danger inside himself. That is one of mythology's wisest lessons. Strength is not pretending you cannot be tempted. Strength is knowing you can be. The Minotaur represents shame, violence, and hidden corruption. In Greek mythology, it is locked inside the labyrinth, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. It is born from a secret, from punishment, pride, desire, and the failure of a king. King Minos hides the creature away. But hiding a monster does not destroy it. It only gives it a place to grow. The labyrinth is the architecture of denial. It is a structure built to contain what a family, a ruler, or a civilization refuses to face. Inside that maze, the monster waits, fed by sacrifice. The Minotaur is disturbing because it is not just a beast. It is buried shame. It is violence hidden beneath the palace. It is the truth society refuses to see. Mythology warns us that what is hidden does not disappear. It grows teeth. Medusa represents the monster created by trauma. In later interpretations of her myth, Medusa is not born monstrous. She becomes monstrous after violation, divine cruelty, and exile. Her gaze turns people to stone. Her hair becomes serpents. She is feared, hunted, and killed. But Medusa is also one of mythology's most tragic figures. Her monstrosity can be read as pain turned into defense. Her gaze freezes others because she herself has been frozen by horror. She becomes untouchable because the world made touch dangerous. Medusa asks a painful question. How many monsters were created by cruelty before they were feared by society? Not every monster begins as evil. Some are made. The zombie represents the fear of losing the self completely. Unlike vampires, werewolves, or sirens, zombies usually do not seduce, speak, or think. They move in crowds. They hunger without personality. They are bodies without identity, motion without meaning, appetite without soul. The zombie is terrifying because it is not only about death. It is about becoming empty while still moving. It is the fear of a society where people consume without thinking, work without purpose, follow without questioning, and lose the inner life that makes them human. Each monster reveals a different human fear. The vampire is desire without morality. The werewolf is rage beneath civilization. The wendigo is greed without limit. The siren is temptation disguised as beauty. The minotaur is shame hidden in the maze. Medusa is trauma turned into terror. The zombie is emptiness wearing a human body. Different monsters, different cultures, different stories, but all of them point back to the same truth. Monsters are the parts of ourselves we are afraid to recognize. That is why ancient monsters still survive in modern storytelling. We may no longer believe every forest hides a demon, but we still understand what these creatures mean. We still fear desire that consumes us, anger that controls us, greed that empties us, temptation that ruins us, secrets we bury, wounds we weaponize, and emptiness that grows inside a human life. Mythology turns invisible dangers into visible forms. It allows us to look at our darkness without naming ourselves directly. It is easier to fear a vampire than admit we drain others. Easier to fear a werewolf than confess our rage. Easier to hunt a monster in the forest than face the monster inside the soul. But the greatest myths do not let us escape so easily. They remind us that the monster is never only outside the village. Sometimes it is in the king's palace. Sometimes it is in the hero's bloodline. Sometimes it is in the mirror. That is why monster stories are not childish. They are some of the oldest moral and psychological maps humanity ever created. They teach us what happens when one part of human nature grows too large. Desire without love becomes vampiric. Anger without discipline becomes bestial. Hunger without gratitude becomes monstrous. Beauty without truth becomes deadly. Shame without healing becomes a labyrinth. Pain without compassion becomes a curse. Life without meaning becomes living death. Every monster is a warning, but every monster is also a question. What do you desire so much that it could consume you? What anger lives beneath your civilized face? What hunger can never be satisfied? What song would you follow even if it led to destruction? What secret have you locked away in the maze? What wound have you turned into a weapon? What part of you is still moving, but no longer fully alive? These are not comfortable questions. That is why mythology hides them inside monsters. A monster gives fear a shape, and once fear has a shape, we can begin to understand it. Perhaps this is why heroes must so often confront monsters. Not because the world simply needs fewer beasts, but because the hero cannot become whole without facing what the monster represents. The monster is the obstacle, but also the teacher. To defeat a monster in myth is not always to destroy evil. Sometimes it means confronting a truth. Sometimes it means ending a curse. Sometimes it means entering the darkness and returning with knowledge. Sometimes the real victory is not over the monster, but over the part of ourselves that gave it power. This is why monsters will never disappear. As long as humans desire, rage, hunger, hide, suffer, envy, consume, and fear themselves, monsters will continue to be born. They will change names. They will change bodies. They will move from forests into cities, from caves into screens, from ancient myths into modern films. But they will remain with us because the darkness that created them remains with us. The monster is humanity's oldest confession. It is the part of ourselves we could not say aloud, so we gave it claws. It is the guilt we buried, so we gave it a grave. It is the hunger we feared, so we gave it teeth. It is the rage we denied, so we gave it fur. It is the trauma we refused to heal, so we gave it a cursed face. It is the emptiness we could not explain, so we gave it a body that keeps walking after the soul is gone. Maybe that is why monsters fascinate us. We fear them, but we also recognize them. We run from them, but we return to their stories again and again. Deep inside, we know they are not strangers. They are warnings written in the language of nightmares. The most terrifying monster is not the one hiding in the dark. It is the one that looks back when we finally understand what the dark was trying to show us. Thank you for watching this journey into the monsters that represent human nature and the hidden fears that shaped mythology across the world. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about ancient myths, forgotten creatures, dark gods, and the timeless shadows that still live inside humanity today.